Property documentation requires a specific training. You are buying something of value in which you are retaining potential long-term value. So the first and only thing you need to do before you start saying or discussing anything at all, engage the services of a lawyer. We have various types of property documents, and it only takes a trained person to be able to determine what document is fit for what transaction. Person is buying property in Nigeria, not wanting to engage the services of professionals simply because they do not want to pay, and at the end of the day, they either end up buying litigation or they buy nothing.
Hello everyone, it's me again, Kimora Ayasi, your host on Discussions on Real Estate Matters. Today, we're going to be talking about property documentation, and we have an esteemed guest who's going to shed light on this very important topic. Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you kindly introduce yourself to our viewers?
My name is Akintola Phillips. I'm a legal practitioner and the team lead of the legal team Pertinence Group.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So we're going to be talking about property documentation. And our first question is, so is it true that potential property owners have little or no idea about the necessary property documents they're supposed to have and read before they purchase a property?
Very true. And the reason behind my affirmative answer is that property documentation requires a specific training so as to determine what particular type of document is fit for what type of property transaction. We have various types of property documents, and it only takes a trained person to be able to determine what document is fit for what transaction. We have had a lot of instances where certain documents have been used for certain transactions, and at the end of the day, you would discover that those documents are not fit for purpose, and there seems to be a trend where you have a lot of persons buying property in Nigeria, not wanting to engage the services of professionals simply because they do not want to pay, and at the end of the day, they either end up buying litigation or they buy nothing.
Yes, okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So what are the pros and cons of property documents? Are there pros and cons?
There's always a pro,
Okay.
but there's no con in having a property document.
Okay.
Even if the document, if you feel it's not needed, why not do the wise thing and err on the side of surplusage? When you have the appropriate documentation, it helps you prove your ownership of that particular property. Documentation is the first and most widely accepted proof of property ownership anywhere in the world today, even though there are other means of proving ownership. But the first thing you'll be required to present to show proof of ownership is your document. So it has all the advantages in the world when you have your property documents, not just any documents, the right documents, because sometimes you might think you have documents. In actual fact, you have nothing.
So how would you advise potential property owners to be educated on these things, property documents, the legalities of property documents?
For potential owners, you don't need to sweat it out. You are buying something of value in which you are retaining potential long-term value. So the first and only thing you need to do before you start saying or discussing anything at all, engage the services of a lawyer. That's the best and only advice I can give.
Okay. So how does government policies affect property documents? How do they affect property documents?
Yes, government policies affect property documentation. The Land Use Act has made it compulsory when you are transferring legal title from one individual to the other, you must interface with the government. And it is these policies that that determines the requirements for this title to be properly transferred. So, for instance, the Land Use Act and some other regulations put a bar on the amount of properties that can be owned by a foreigner and the extent of ownership. That for me is an example of a government policy or law affecting property ownership in Nigeria. Now, the another thing that also affects property documentation, you have the various judicial pronouncements from the various courts, from the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the High Courts, various High Courts, whether states or High Court of the FCT. They hand down these pronouncements, which at the end of the day ultimately affects practice when it comes to property documentation. For example, for a long time, it was not settled law that power of attorney can be used to transfer legal title in land. But at a certain time, the Supreme Court, in the case of Ibrahim and Obaji, held that due to the intention of parties, power of attorney can be used to transfer title in land. That for me is just the apex court in the land formulating a policy that is affecting property documentation. So when we say government, I want us to see it beyond the executive arm of the government. We should see the legislature and the judiciary as well, because they have their own roles to play, especially the judiciary. They go a very, very long way in framing these policies.
Well, from what you've said, as you said, if you don't have a legal property document, you have nothing. So which means property documentation is a very important topic. It is very important. So what other areas, what other things can we educate our viewers on concerning proper documentation?
Now, when it comes to proper documentation, you must be certain as to the type of transaction you are engaging in. And the first thing I mentioned is that you must get a lawyer. And not just getting a lawyer, you must make sure that there are different fields of law. And for these different fields, we have different persons whose areas of expertise falls across these various fields. For some, it's real estate. For some, it's litigation, on and on like that. You must not just get any lawyer. You must get somebody who is well versed and well grounded in that field to help you with your documentations. There are different transactions that has to do with land. You have leases, you have assignments, you have mortgages, and so on and so forth. And you have various occurrences. For example, if I talk about a document like assets, for some people, they might have not come across something called an asset, but an asset is a property document, which is used where somebody is a beneficiary of a property under a will. So the executors will transfer that property to the person via what is known as an asset. It's just like a deed of assignment, but not a deed of assignment. So it only takes somebody who is well versed in these various fields. So get a lawyer, let the lawyer determine the type of transaction and the appropriate document. Now, when you get your lawyer, if you believe in the competence of the lawyer you have gotten, you need to trust in the competence. We've had situations where clients have had to second guess the workings of their lawyers, and for me, that has not borne, it has never bore any fruit, any good fruit before. Because sometimes when you have too many hands in the stew goes sour. So you just need to find somebody, stick with him, let him do his thing. And you have to, you have instances of some clients who are already set in their ways. They just tell the lawyer, I want documentation and documentation alone. But property documentation does not just stop at signing of the deeds. You still need to perfect your title. A lot of people in Nigeria now just buy properties, sign deeds of assignments, sign contracts, sign whatever documents you have. They don't perfect your title. And when you don't perfect your title, there's no legal title that has been transferred to you. Anything you have is at best equitable. Anything you have is at best equitable. So that's
it. Thank you so much for joining us today. So viewers, as Mr. Phillips has said, we're giving a cautionary advice to you, a cautionary statement to you. If you don't have a legal property documents, you have nothing. So property documentation is very important. So be sure all your property documents are legal and they're accurate. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a discussion on real estate matters and we talked about property documentation. Join us next time for another episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Pertinence TV. Drop your comments, we'll always respond. Thank you.